What if every legend you dismissed about ancient Egypt, the death spells, the hidden chambers, the rituals bathed in moonlight, was more than just myth? What if the gods of the Nile still watch, their silent eyes etched in stone, punishing anyone who disturbs their sacred dead? Step carefully, because history's darkest secrets don't stay buried forever. Under a velvet sky spangled with 1,000 burning stars, the Nile winds its silver thread through a kingdom of dust and stone. Its gentle lap against the banks, a heartbeat older than empires, older even than the names carved in hieroglyphs that glow faintly beneath the moon. You walk along the river's edge, the air thick with the scent of silt and desert bloom, and the night hums with a silence so profound it seems alive, a silence that holds the weight of millennia somewhere beyond the darkness. Colossal statues stand like frozen sentinels, their features softened by time yet still watching, their hollow eyes fixed on the horizon, as though guarding secrets that no mortal should disturb. And you feel it, the strange, tingling prickle that creeps up your spine when the world around you is too vast, too ancient, too knowing. The breeze carries a whisper, the faintest suggestion of a voice that is not yours, and the reeds sway as if something unseen has passed between them, the Nile itself shifting as though aware of your presence, aware of every heartbeat, every breath. This was a land where life and death were not opposites, but threads of the same tapestry, woven together by gods with falcon heads and jackal masks, where a gel grain of sand could have once pressed against a pharaoh's sandal or hidden a cursed amulet beneath its surface. And as you stare into the shimmering river, it feels as if the past is staring back, measuring you, weighing your curiosity against its eternal patience, and you realize that for the ancient Egyptians, nothing ever truly ended, it only transformed, only slipped quietly into another form beneath the watchful gaze of deities who never sleep. You imagine priests by torchlight performing rites on this very shore, their chants rolling like thunder over the water, calling on Osiris to guard the dead and on Ra to rise again. And you wonder if those chants still echo faintly, woven into the breeze, waiting for ears sensitive enough to hear them. The pyramids loom in the distance, their silhouettes sharp against the starlit sky, not merely tombs but cosmic machines aligned with celestial paths. Their very stones humming with stories older than recorded history. And for a fleeting moment you feel small, as if you are trespassing on sacred ground, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. Even the stars seem to lean closer, their light glinting on the river's ripples like 1,000 watching eyes. And in that hushed, spellbound moment, you understand why the ancients believed the gods could walk among them, unseen yet ever present, their gaze eternal, their power undiminished by the passage of time. The Nile whispers again. The statues seem to lean a fraction closer, and you sense that the land remembers everything that its watchers have never truly left. They call it coincidence. At first, a string of accidents strung like beads on a necklace, too perfect to ignore. Yet the desert keeps no coincidences, only warnings carved in stone and whispered through the ages. And as the torchlight flickers over a tomb wall etched with threats against those who would disturb the sacred dead, you can almost hear the low hum of an ancient voice daring you to step closer. When Lord Carnarvon, the patron of Tutankhamun's excavation, died mysteriously in 1923, the world's newspapers screamed of a pharaoh's curse, describing how the lights in Cairo flickered out at the moment of his passing, how his dog back in England let out a howl and dropped dead at the same instant, and how the bite of an infected mosquito had bloomed into a mortal wound that should never have been fatal, yet claimed him anyway, as though invisible hands had guided the smallest events toward inevitable punishment. And it wasn't just Carnarvon, other members of the expedition would fall ill or meet untimely ends, each story feeding the legend. A radiologist who took x-rays of the boy king's body struck down unexpectedly, an aristocrat killed in a freak accident after visiting the tomb, even Howard Carter himself haunted by whispers that strange happenings followed him long after the discovery. Skeptics will tell you about bacteria sealed in tomb air for millennia or the dangers of excavation, but beneath the skeptical chatter, the wind over the Valley of the Kings carries another explanation, older and far less forgiving. The ancient Egyptians carved their warnings with care. Death? shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. One reads, a line so elegant and terrifying it has lived for centuries in our collective imagination, and though modern scholars dismiss it as myth, part of you cannot help but wonder, standing in that torchlit corridor, with walls closing in and dust swirling like restless spirits, if the curse is not merely words, but a memory embedded in the very stones, a force woven into the fabric of belief that shapes the world as surely as gravity does. Imagine the workers, millennia ago, sealing the tomb, their hands trembling as they placed protective amulets and whispered invocations, knowing that kings were not meant to be woken, that the gods would demand a price for hubris. Imagine Carnarvon's last breath, the flicker of the light, the echoing howl of a dog who could not see Egypt, but felt its ancient wrath cross oceans and time. In the stillness of the tomb, you sense it too, that prickling on your skin, that tightening in your chest, not proof, but presence, a silent message. The pharaohs may be dust, but their reach is eternal. The pyramid looms before you, a jagged silhouette against a sky flushed with twilight, its ancient stones breathing out heat gathered through 1,000 scorching days, and as you step closer, the wind sighs over the desert, as if warning you to turn back. For beneath this mountain of limestone lie corridors no sunlight has touched since pharaohs commanded the Nile. Archaeologists speak of cleverly disguised passageways, false doors carved to mislead intruders, shafts that plunge into darkness with no promise of a bottom. And there are whispers, always whispers of chambers still undiscovered, rooms that may cradle secrets so profound the world is not ready to see them. In 2017, thermal scans revealed mysterious voids inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, vast spaces where no one expected hollows, spaces that seemed to hum with possibility, as if the pyramid itself were a labyrinth of riddles left unsolved, its builders' intentions lost to time yet lingering like a half-remembered dream. Picture an ancient priest standing in a hidden room, torchlight glinting off polished alabaster, reciting prayers meant to anchor a king's soul, while just beyond the walls, workers brick over an entrance that no map will ever mark, an entrance meant to vanish into legend. You can almost hear the grinding of stone, the shouts muffled by distance, the silence that follows as the desert reclaims its dominion, burying the evidence under centuries of shifting sand. Modern explorers push ground-penetrating radar into the pyramid's bones, their screens flickering with tantalizing signals, but the sands are patient, and the pyramids themselves seem reluctant to yield, as though the gods embedded a will in stone to protect what lies within. And perhaps it is not gold or scrolls or treasures that the hidden chambers guard, but something older, stranger, a knowledge so potent it could unravel the world we know. Or perhaps a warning carved not in words but in geometry, in the alignment of corridors and the careful placement of stones, a cosmic message staring upward into the heavens. You imagine the stale air waiting inside, undisturbed for millennia, carrying the faint dusty perfume of sacred oils long evaporated. And you wonder what would happen if you broke that seal, if the balance carefully held for thousands of years would shift, if the Nile's eternal watchers would stir. The pyramids are not just monuments, they are sentinels of time, their very existence a riddle, and somewhere deep inside their shadowed hearts, a hidden chamber waits, listening, holding its breath, keeping a secret that may never be spoken aloud. And as the twilight deepens into night, the stars prick the sky like watchful eyes, and you realize the pyramids are not silent, they are whispering still, in a language of stone and starlight that few will ever understand. Before we descend deeper into Egypt's haunted corridors, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell icon. You don't want to miss the chilling secrets, mysterious curses, and unsettling royal rituals still lurking in the shadows of the ancient world. Let your curiosity guide you. Join our growing community of history seekers, and together, we'll uncover what should have stayed buried. In the flickering light of resin-fed torches, a procession winds its way toward the tomb's yawning mouth, their shadows stretching like specters against walls carved with stories older than empires, and you can almost hear the low murmur of priests chanting words meant to bridge the chasm between worlds, a hymn trembling on the edge of silence, as fragile as the breath it seeks to restore. The ritual of opening the mouth was no mere ceremony but a sacred resurrection, a belief that a soul's senses must be rekindled so it could taste, see, and speak again in the afterlife. And you picture a high priest robed in leopard skin, stepping forward with a carved adze shaped like a fishtail, its polished surface catching the glow of torchlight as he gently touches it to the lips of a gilded mask covering a lifeless face. A gesture that is part caress, part command. Around him, incense coils upward in ghostly spirals, filling the air with frankincense and myrrh, their sweetness sharp and strange, mingling with the dry scent of ancient stone. A boy, perhaps the deceased pharaoh's son or a favored nephew, stands nearby clutching a small statuette of Horus, his knuckles white with awe and fear, because everyone here believes that in this moment, the dead king hovers just beyond sight, waiting for his senses to awaken so he can breathe again under Osiris's watchful gaze. The priests move with deliberate grace, striking a rhythmic pattern on drums that echo like distant thunder, each beat meant to summon vitality, each whisper meant to guide the Ka, the life force, back to its earthly vessel. The adze touches the eyes, the ears, the nose, each contact a promise that nothing has been forgotten, that the soul will not wander blind or mute through eternity. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an ending but a doorway, and to pass through unprepared was unthinkable, a perilous journey through fields of reeds and monstrous judges that required every sense sharpened, every memory intact. Even now, millennia later, as you imagine standing in that subterranean chamber, you feel the gravity of the moment pressing into your chest, the smell of smoke, the cool kiss of stone under your fingertips, the faint tremor of something unseen stirring in the darkness beyond. The ritual completes with a soft, final whisper, the torches crackle, and for a heartbeat the air seems to shift, as if a breath has been drawn where no living lungs remain. As if the veil between the living and the dead has thinned just enough for a king to open his mouth and remember his voice, a voice that might carry blessings or curses. Beneath the blazing Egyptian sun, where dunes roll like frozen waves and the pyramids pierce the horizon with their unblinking geometry, the business of death was a craft as meticulous as it was unsettling, and you can almost feel the weight of those preparations in the still air of a tomb, where even silence seems to hold its breath. The embalmers, skilled artisans in the service of eternity, began by washing the body with palm wine and Nile water, their hands steady yet reverent, aware that a pharaoh's flesh was not mere mortal matter but the vessel of a living god. With delicate precision they would slide hooked instruments through the nose, extracting the brain in damp, coiled threads, a grisly act performed with sacred purpose, for they believed the intellect resided in the heart, not the head, and the skull's hollowness was no tragedy but a necessary step toward divinity. Next came the organs, carefully removed and preserved, each one assigned to a guardian deity, the liver wrapped and entrusted to Mseti, the lungs sealed beneath Hapi's protection, the stomach to Duamutef, and the intestines to Kebesenuef, all placed within canopic jars, whose lids bore carved animal heads, staring with eternal vigilance. The heart, seat of emotion and morality, was often left within the chest, or replaced with a sacred scarab, a talisman to weigh against the feather of Ma'at when judgment came. The empty body cavity was filled with natron salts, absorbing every trace of moisture as the desert wind whispered outside. And after 70 days, the desiccated form was anointed with sacred oils, perfumed resins seeping into cracks like amber tears, before being swaddled in countless layers of linen, each strip bound with whispered prayers, each not a promise to guide the soul safely through the underworld. Sometimes, small protective amulets were tucked between wrappings, their tiny forms pressing against dried flesh like secret companions for the long journey ahead. But not all practices were so serene. Whispers tell of servants sealed alive within chambers, of soldiers executed to guard a king's passage, of loyal animals sacrificed so their spirits might serve in eternity, acts that chilled even their contemporaries, yet were accepted as offerings demanded by divine bloodlines. Standing before such a tomb today, the faint scent of resin long vanished, and the painted walls flaking under your fingertips, you might still sense the weight of those choices, the cold pragmatism wrapped in reverence, the conviction that eternity required a price. In the half-light, the linen-bound figure on a gilded bier, seems less like a corpse than a sleeper paused between breaths, waiting for the moment when ancient gods will summon him to rise, and you cannot help but wonder if the sands themselves remember the cries of those buried alive. Their echoes caught in the wind that sweeps endlessly over the Valley of the Kings. The papyrus crackles faintly beneath your fingers, its surface brittle as autumn leaves, yet the inked hieroglyphs gleam as if freshly drawn, their curves and angles alive with intent, and as you tilt the fragile scroll toward the light of a trembling oil lamp, shadows leap across the walls, making the carved gods seem to stir and listen. The Book of the Dead was never a single book but a living chorus of spells, charms, and instructions, a map through the perilous darkness between death and rebirth. And in these faded symbols, you feel the echo of every soul who once clutched such words as their only lifeline against the unknown. The ancients believed that when the body failed, the soul would step into a realm of shifting sands and silent waters, where gates guarded by monstrous deities demanded secret names, where a wrong word could erase your very existence. And so each spell was a torch in the night, a whispered password meant to open a door where none should exist. Imagine a scribe hunched in a lamplit workshop thousands of years ago, his reed pen gliding across fresh papyrus as he mutters invocations under his breath, perhaps glancing over his shoulder at the still form of a noble awaiting burial, aware that his careful words might mean the difference between salvation and oblivion. Some passages promise protection. May your heart not betray you in the hall of two truths, while others read like warnings wrapped in poetry, serpents of fire, lakes of boiling water, unseen judges weighing a feather against a lifetime's worth of choices. As you read, the air seems to thicken, as though the words themselves remember being spoken aloud, and for an instant you could swear a faint susurration slips through the chamber, the sound of voices long extinguished, their fears and hopes still lingering like incense that refuses to fade. You picture the funeral procession outside, priests chanting over a wrapped form, while deep in the earth, these words are tucked beside the mummy like a final breath, like a friend who will not abandon you. Even today, Egyptologists admit the Book of the Dead holds mysteries, spells whose meanings are half forgotten, instructions that may point to rituals we no longer comprehend, and in that ignorance lies its power. For to glimpse these whispers is to be reminded that death was never simple to those who faced it with eyes wide open. The flame gutters, the papyrus sighs, and the room feels suddenly crowded, as if the dead have leaned in to listen, to see whether you, too, will trust their map or risk walking the afterlife blind. In the half-light of a setting sun, the temple courtyard hums with a reverence so deep it borders on dread, and you can almost see the flicker of torch flames against carved pillars, the smoke curling upward in thin blue streams that carry prayers to the gods who wear animal faces. To the ancient Egyptians, animals were not mere creatures but sacred vessels, living echoes of the divine cats embodied Bastet's grace and protection. Ibises carried Thoth's wisdom, crocodiles bore the brute power of Sobek, and bulls pulsed with Apis's strength. And when pharaohs sought to honor or appease these deities, their offerings were sometimes far more than grain or incense. Imagine rows upon rows of feline mummies, their tiny forms wrapped in linen as carefully as a king, paws pressed together as if in silent supplication, eyes once bright now replaced by painted symbols of eternity, each one a whispered plea for favor in a world where the Nile's floods, the desert's tempers, and the gods' moods decided the fate of millions. Archaeologists have uncovered entire cat necropolises, dark chambers filled to the ceiling with feline remains, their sheer number suggesting ritual breeding and mass sacrifice. And in some corners of those tombs lie dogs, hawks, baboons, and even sacred bulls, each preserved in the same meticulous fashion, their lives offered in exchange for divine protection or cosmic balance. A priest might have stroked the head of a purring cat before the blade descended, murmuring a prayer to Bastet, believing with utter conviction that this single act could shield the kingdom from plague or famine. To modern eyes, it seems brutal, but to them it was devotion, an intimate transaction between mortals and immortals, a belief that every heartbeat could tip the scales of cosmic order. Imagine the cries of animals echoing against the temple walls, blending with the low drone of chanting voices, the metallic tang of blood mingling with incense, until the air itself becomes a potent offering. Even in death, these creatures were treated as sacred. They were embalmed, anointed, and laid to rest with amulets tucked between their wrappings. Their bodies sometimes placed in miniature coffins shaped like the animals they once were. The artistry so tender it suggests love as much as fear. And perhaps some child of that long-ago land wept quietly for a beloved pet, even as priests declared the sacrifice necessary. For even devotion does not erase grief. Standing in those excavated chambers today, under flickering electric lights, you might feel a pang of awe and sorrow, sensing the weight of thousands of small lives given to bridge the gulf between humans and gods. Their mummified forms a testament to a world where nothing was ordinary, where every creature carried a fragment of the divine, and where even the softest purr could be heard by eternity. In the cool hush of an underground hall where columns rise like petrified trees and the scent of centuries-old dust clings to your skin, you can almost hear the faint shuffle of sandaled feet that no longer exist, a whisper of movement that belongs to a legend older than memory, the tale of priests who never truly died. They were said to be keepers of forbidden knowledge, chosen not merely to serve their gods but to bind themselves to eternity. Their vows heavier than stone, their secrets sharper than obsidian blades. Imagine them cloaked in white linen, faces veiled, their eyes pools of torchlight, as they stood before an altar carved with hieroglyphs that promised power to those who dared reach for it, and hear the echo of their oaths: to protect the sacred gateways, to guard the spells that could summon storms or still a beating heart, to remain watchful even when flesh failed. Stories tell of priests seen centuries after their own burials, figures glimpsed at the edges of torchlight in forgotten temples, or strangers with ancient amulets appearing in remote villages, only to vanish when pursued. Some scholars dismiss these as campfire tales spun by travelers, but others point to hieroglyphic records that speak cryptically of the circle that does not end, a brotherhood entrusted with maintaining the delicate balance between the worlds. The desert itself seems to conspire with the story, for its shifting sands reveal and swallow ruins with uncanny timing, as if unseen hands decide what should remain hidden and what may be glimpsed. You imagine a lone archaeologist, lantern in hand, descending into a chamber untouched for 3,000 years, finding fresh footprints in the dust, the air heavy with the musk of burning oil, though no other soul has entered, his heart pounding as he remembers the warnings carved on the entrance. We who serve have not departed. And perhaps somewhere deep the earth, beneath layers of stone and forgotten prayers, a gathering takes place tonight, a circle of figures wrapped in shadow, chanting in voices that weave past and present together, ensuring that cosmic order does not fray. Their undying nature may not be flesh preserved by mummification but memory itself, a will so strong it seeps into walls and winds, compelling generation after generation to continue their vigil. Standing here, surrounded by silent statues that seem almost to breathe, you can almost sense their presence, as though the air is crowded with eyes you cannot see, watching to ensure that you, too, do not trespass too far. And in that breathless moment, the desert's vastness feels intimate, as if the universe itself leans closer. And you understand why the ancients believed some guardians never left their posts, why the legend of the undying priesthood endures like a heartbeat beneath the sand. Under a blistering sun that seemed to boil the horizon into a wavering mirage, Pharaoh Akhenaten stepped away from tradition, with a decision so radical it split Egypt's soul in two. And even now, the wind that sighs through broken temples seems to carry a warning about the price he paid. He turned from the familiar pantheon of gods, silencing the voices of Amun, Osiris, and Ra, and raised his face instead to Aten, the sun disk itself, as the one and only divine force, a bold heresy that erased centuries of ritual and angered priests who had long held Egypt's spiritual power in their hands, their fury masked behind carved smiles and ceremonial gestures. Imagine the tens, Ion in the royal courts, whispers sliding between pillars like snakes, as officials questioned if a single man could rewrite the cosmos, while the common people, who had prayed to many gods for protection, felt the ground beneath their beliefs quake. Akhenaten built a new city, Akhenaten, its sandstone walls and open temples designed to bathe worshippers in Aten's light, a place where shadows were forbidden, as if darkness itself had become suspect. But in breaking with tradition, he made enemies not just of men but, as legend tells, of forces unseen, for curses were said to rise like desert storms, carried on the wind by outraged deities denied their offerings, and strange omens began to haunt the land. Nile floods came at the wrong times, plagues whispered through villages, and a blood-red moon hung over the horizon longer than any scribe could remember. Some claimed that statues of old gods wept or shattered without touch, while others spoke of priests performing secret rites to summon divine wrath upon the heretic king. When Akhenaten's body was finally laid to rest, the record of his reign was chiseled away from monuments, his name hacked out of stone, as if erasing him might erase the cosmic wound he had inflicted, but the curses whispered to linger. Following those who dared to disturb the ruins of Akhenaten, archaeologists have reported tools mysteriously breaking, sudden illnesses, and the sensation of being watched among toppled columns. Standing there yourself, you can almost feel the weight of that forbidden sunlight, as though Aten's gaze and the fury of every abandoned god converge on you in silent judgment. The desert seems to breathe around you, its sands shifting as if restless with ancient grudges, and you understand why Akhenaten's heresy is remembered not just as a religious reform, but as a cosmic rebellion that even death could not quiet, a reminder that some powers, once provoked, do not forgive. In the shimmering heat of the desert, where the horizon blurs and the air seems to dance with mirages, ancient Egyptians believed the world's most dangerous secrets were guarded by serpent gods, whose coils encircled the underworld itself, and among the most feared was Apep, the colossal snake of chaos, an eternal enemy of the sun god. Ra slithering unseen through the darkness beneath creation, waiting to swallow light whole. Priests whispered of its power during night rituals, cutting into the silence with protective spells carved on papyrus, their voices trembling as though the very act of naming Apep could summon its gaze. On the walls of secret tomb passages, artisans painted serpents with glittering eyes and gaping jaws, their bodies twisted into endless loops, a visual warning to intruders that the realm they trespassed into was not unguarded. And even today, in tombs like those of the Valley of the Kings, you can trace these warnings in flickering torchlight, the fangs of painted cobras seeming to shift as shadows dance across the walls. Some tombs carried inscriptions more direct, threats carved in red ochre promising death to anyone who dared disturb the pharaoh's eternal sleep, not as poetic metaphor but as a spell, a line of defense against greed and curiosity. And the story goes that thieves who ignored such warnings often met grim fates, poisonous snakes hidden in sealed chambers, traps rigged to collapse passages, or illnesses no healer could name. Egyptologists recount how certain burial sites held small mummified serpents, wrapped like offerings, but positioned near doorways, their preserved bodies serving as both talisman and trap, a reminder that even in death the pharaoh's guardians struck with silent precision. Imagine stepping into such a chamber yourself, the air thick with the smell of dust and ancient resin, your light catching the gleam of a painted serpent's eye, and for a moment you could swear it blinked. The desert wind outside seems to hush as if listening, and you realize how deeply the Egyptians believed that symbols could breathe, that words could wound, that even a painted cobra could bite if the gods willed it. Modern archaeologists have described strange incidents, a researcher collapsing after opening a sealed niche, a sudden swarm of snakes appearing where none had been moments before, cameras failing in the presence of certain carvings, as though the old warnings still echo through time. The sand itself seems to shift uneasily, as if a buried god stirs beneath it, coils tightening, waiting for the next trespasser to test the boundary between the living world and the shadowed kingdom of the dead, where serpents still guard what mortals were never meant to find. Beneath the golden shimmer of 1,000 sunrises on the Nile, whispered on reeds swaying in the river's breeze, there lurked a story so macabre that even hardened priests spoke it only in the hush of temple shadows. The tale of sacred cannibalism, a myth that dared to suggest the gods themselves consumed divine flesh to inherit cosmic power. And the echoes of this belief seeped into royal rituals and ancient spells, like a phantom's breath, carved into pyramid walls are fragments of the pyramid texts, the world's oldest known religious writings, and within them the cannibal hymn chants that the pharaoh, upon death, would devour the gods to absorb their strength, a banquet of stars and spirits where eternity was won not through worship but through consumption. Imagine standing in a flickering torchlit chamber as a scribe recites these lines. The king eats men, he feeds on gods, the air heavy with incense and dread. The notion that divinity could be swallowed like a sacrament, both horrifying and awe-inspiring. The myth paints the pharaoh not merely as a ruler but as a cosmic predator, a being who must taste creation itself to ascend beyond mortal limits. And one can almost feel the tension between reverence and revulsion that such a belief would inspire among those who prepared the rituals, their trembling hands dressing the royal body in fine linen, while their minds dared not linger on the image of gods devoured. Some scholars suggest this wasn't literal cannibalism, but a metaphor for absorbing divine essence through ritual meals or offerings. Yet even as metaphor, the idea carries a weight that chills, as if acknowledging the terrible hunger of the universe itself. In festival scenes painted on tomb walls, great feasts of bread, beer, roasted meats, and fruits piled high are shown not just as celebration, but as echoes of a cosmic meal, where the line between honoring the gods and becoming them blurred. Perhaps on certain festival nights, as the moon cast silver across temple courtyards, and music of sistrums trembled through the dark, a priest would raise a cup of red wine the color of blood and for an instant feel the unsettling suggestion that the sip was more than symbolic, that the boundary between mortal and divine was thin as papyrus. And you, standing centuries later in a museum, staring at fragments of those same texts, might sense the same unease, the same fascination, as if somewhere in the silence between hieroglyphs the old hymn is still being whispered, its meaning not entirely dead, its warning lingering. To reach the realm of gods, something must always be consumed. In the temple city of Abydos, where the desert yields to sandstone sanctuaries dedicated to Osiris, tales linger like wind-borne whispers of statues that weep in the silence of moonlit corridors, their carved stone faces streaked with moisture no desert air should allow. Abydos, the mythical gateway to the underworld, was believed to be the place where Osiris himself was buried, and its temples became a pilgrimage for kings and commoners alike. But among the hieroglyphs praising the god of resurrection, there are scattered records, cryptic and rare, of nights when the statues themselves seemed to cry, as if burdened by some unbearable secret. Priests once recounted that on certain festival evenings, when torches flared against the black sky and drums called the faithful to ceremony, faint trails of water would snake down the stone cheeks of Osiris or the falcon-headed Horus, glinting in torchlight like tears of glass. Some said it was condensation, the cool desert night meeting the day's heat, but pilgrims swore it was sorrow, the gods mourning forgotten oaths or the broken promises of men. And even now, archaeologists studying Abydos have reported seeing inexplicable dampness on statues deep within sealed chambers, places untouched by wind or water for millennia. Imagine stepping into one of those sanctuaries alone, the echo of your own footsteps swallowed by thick stone, and there on the smooth, ancient face of a god, you glimpse a shining drop, sliding downward, a gesture so human it chills you. Legends claim that those who witnessed the statues weep would be marked by visions or dreams, some benign, others harrowing, as though the gods had chosen them to bear messages across time's vast chasm. Local villagers, their families living in the shadow of Abydos for generations, still speak quietly of strange sounds, soft sobs, carried on the desert wind at night, or lights flickering where no flame should burn. One tale tells of a shepherd who sought shelter among the ruins during a sandstorm, and awoke to find damp streaks on every statue in the chamber. Though no rain had fallen for months, and for the rest of his life, he claimed the gods watched him through the eyes of every carving he passed. Perhaps the most unsettling thought is that these statues have seen every age, every trespass, every prayer forgotten, and every promise broken. And in their silent vigil, they remember the rise and fall of dynasties, the theft of sacred treasures, the laughter of priests long turned to dust remember enough to mourn. And as you stand there, the desert's breath brushing your skin, you may feel the same unshakable truth. That stone, too, can grieve, and that Abydos still keeps secrets that the living are not meant to understand. Under a copper sky where the horizon wavered like a dream, there are stories etched into the memory of Egypt's sands, stories of the black sand plagues, whispered by scribes who dipped their reeds into ink with trembling hands, as if even writing the words might invite the curse to return. Ancient chronicles speak of nights when the wind rose without warning, hissing through temple colonnades and sweeping across the desert in a fury, carrying with it not the pale, familiar sand of Ra's daylight domain but grains as dark as obsidian, grains that stained the skin and clung to every surface like a warning from the gods themselves. Villagers who awoke to find their fields dusted with black sand would gather in silence, their faces pale against the strange darkness at their feet, and by nightfall, the first fevers would begin burning hot, merciless, as if the desert had poured its wrath directly into their veins. Livestock stumbled and collapsed, wells turned foul, and distant fires flared along the horizon, where desperate priests lit pyres of cedar and frankincense, their chants rising against the stars in a fragile attempt to appease whatever force had been stirred. Some legends claim these plagues arrived whenever sacred tombs were desecrated or forbidden knowledge stolen. The black sand and omen sent by the gods' own messengers, serpent-headed spirits that slithered unseen along the dunes. Others believed it was no divine warning but a breach between worlds, the underworld's dust bleeding into the realm of the living, bringing sickness with it like a shadow that could not be outrun. Imagine a lone traveler crossing the desert on such a night, his lantern flickering in the wind, every step sinking into a darkness that seems alive, each grain of sand whispering against the leather of his sandals, the horizon swallowed by a haze of swirling black. He coughs once, then again, tasting bitterness in the air, and wonders if he has stepped into the gods' forgotten battlefield. Archaeologists have unearthed strange layers of dark sediment near Abydos and Saqqara, puzzling over their origins, some suggesting volcanic ash, others an unknown environmental anomaly. But local stories insist it was the black sand, proof that the plagues were not merely tales told to frighten children but events etched into the earth itself. And so, when you stand in the desert and feel the wind lift the fine grains around your ankles, you might glance toward the horizon and wonder what memory the land carries, what punishment still waits beneath the dunes, silent and patient, for the next trespasser bold enough to disturb Egypt's sleeping gods. In the glare of the relentless sun, where limestone blocks rise like frozen thunder, whispers persist that the architects of Egypt's greatest pyramids were not merely men but something enduring immortal minds who move through centuries like shadows through shifting dunes, their knowledge too vast, their precision too perfect to belong wholly to mortals. Imagine them standing atop unfinished ramps, eyes narrowed against the desert wind, surveying stones that would outlast empires, the geometry they commanded as if the stars themselves had whispered blueprints into their dreams. Legends told among workers spoke of a figure who appeared at different sites over generations, same face, same measured voice offering counsel on alignments and angles, then vanishing before dawn like mist over the Nile, and some claimed he was Thoth in human form, the god of wisdom walking unseen among them. Hieroglyphic fragments hint at secret councils held beneath starlit skies, where the architects traced constellations in the sand and spoke of eternity as if they were its keepers, their voices low enough to be drowned by the whisper of wind over stone. Even today, when scholars marvel at the perfect cardinal orientation of the Great Pyramid, or the precision of blocks so closely fitted a blade of grass cannot slip between them, there is a feeling, a quiet hum, that something timeless guided those hands. The desert itself seems to agree, its nights unnervingly silent around Giza, as if guarding an ancient pact between sky and stone. Imagine a stonemason, sweat streaking through the dust on his ski, and glancing at a mysterious overseer who seems untouched by age, whose gaze carries the weight of eons. What secrets would that mason have seen in those eyes? And would he dare speak them aloud? Some modern theorists, their voices half in awe and half in jest, suggest the architects tapped into knowledge now lost, mathematics born from the stars or whispered by the dead, while local tales insist the spirits of those builders still wander the plateau, inspecting every shift of sand, every tremor of the earth, unwilling to let their perfect lines fall to ruin, standing before the pyramids at twilight. When the desert wind softens and the sky blooms with violet and gold, you may feel the uncanny sense of being observed, not by tourists or guards, but by those ancient minds, their patience stretching beyond time, their work unfinished until the last shadow has passed over the stones. Perhaps in that moment, as darkness creeps over the plateau, you understand why the Egyptians believed that to build was to touch eternity, and why they whispered of architects who never truly died. There is a story, half legend and half remembered terror, of a night when the Nile, Egypt's lifeblood, the river that carved civilization from desert stone, ran crimson under a bruised sky, its gentle current transformed into a flowing wound beneath the stars. Ancient records etched on temple walls speak of a dreadful omen when fishermen pulled up nets heavy, not with silver-scaled bounty but with lifeless creatures, their gills clogged and their bodies rolling in the water's strange red shimmer, and the moon's pale glow on the surface resembled an unblinking eye, watching the living tremble. Some said it was the wrath of the gods, a divine punishment for broken vows or plundered tombs, and priests gathered on the riverbanks with trembling hands, their torches casting long, jagged shadows across the water as they chanted desperate hymns to Hapi, god of the Nile, begging for forgiveness. Villagers dipped cautious fingers into the river only to pull them back, stained as though by fresh blood, and fled into their mud-brick homes, bolting wooden doors against the whispering wind. Legends claim that in certain places the water boiled as if angered, and flocks of ibis took to the skies in frantic flight, abandoning the reeds that had sheltered them for generations. Modern scholars debate whether this event was an algal bloom, a surge of red sediment, or a trick of light and imagination, but the power of the story lies not in explanation, but in the way it was felt like the sky itself had lowered its gaze and found Egypt wanting. Caravans delayed their journeys. Traders turned their donkeys back from the banks. And even the most seasoned boatmen refused to steer their vessels into what they believed had become a river of death. Some whispered that the river's redness was the blood of serpents slain by Ra in his nightly battle against chaos, spilled into the world of men as a warning, while others believed it was the Nile grieving for Akhenaten's heresy or for some forgotten crime buried with the kings. Imagine standing there, the warm desert night pressing in, the air thick with the scent of silt and fear. Watching a sacred river bleed beneath the stars, you would feel small, fragile, a heartbeat away from the gods' displeasure. Even now, when the Nile runs calm and green, there are fishermen who swear they have seen it flash red at sunset, just for a heartbeat, as though the river remembers. And as the wind stirs the papyrus reeds, you can almost hear it whisper, "Every gift can be taken back. Every lifeline can turn to a warning if the balance is broken." In the deepest folds of desert night, when the stars burn like watchful eyes over the Valley of the Kings, there are tales older than dust itself, tales of men who pried open forbidden doors and found eternity waiting with bared teeth. The tomb robbers of ancient Egypt, driven by hunger, greed, or sheer desperation, slipped past sleeping guards and crept into the cold, echoing chambers of pharaohs, their torchlight licking gold and lapis lazuli, their hearts pounding like war drums against their ribs. But the ancients had warned them, carving fierce spells into stone, painting serpents with unblinking eyes on walls, writing in red ochre curses that promised anguish unending to any who dared steal from the dead. "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king," an inscription that still chills modern readers. Imagine a robber lowering himself into a shaft beneath a sky pale with moonlight, rope biting into his palms, the smell of ancient air rising like a warning, and in that silence, a single grain of sand falls and echoes too loudly, as if the gods themselves are listening. Some stories say the robbers would feel the air grow heavier as they reached the burial chamber, their torches sputtering for no reason, strange whispers curling at the edge of hearing, and yet they pressed forward, fingers shaking as they brushed dust from a jeweled amulet or pried gold from a sarcophagus. But afterward, they would vanish, struck down by sudden fevers, consumed by accidents too improbable to be mere chance, or tormented by nightmares so vivid they woke, screamin', of ashen pharaohs standing at their bedsides. The most feared tale is of a man who returned with treasure, only to watch his family sicken, and his crops fail. The desert wind whispering his name, until, half mad, he staggered back to the tomb to return what he had stolen, only to find the entrance sealed by shifting sands, as if the earth itself had swallowed the crime. Even modern explorers speak in hushed voices of the curse of the pharaohs, a phrase born when members of Lord Carnarvon's team died mysteriously after entering Tutankhamun's tomb, their deaths feeding the legend that Egypt's kings still protect their sleep. Perhaps the truth lies between superstition and coincidence, but stand in a tomb's cool shadow, and you'll feel it, the weight of centuries, the gaze of stone-carved gods, the sense that something is measuring your every breath. And as the desert wind sighs over forgotten graves, you may understand why the ancients believed theft was not just a crime against kings, but an insult to eternity itself, an insult that eternity never forgives. On windless nights when the Nile lies glassy and black beneath a canopy of indifferent stars, villagers along its banks tell stories of ghost ships gliding silently over the water, their hulls shimmering like moonlit smoke, their sails billowing though no breeze stirs, their decks crowded with shadows that neither speak nor stir. Fishermen swear they've glimpsed these spectral vessels slipping past reed-lined inlets, the faint creak of rigging mingling with the river's slow murmur, only for the ships to dissolve to mist before a second glance. Legend says they are the funeral barges of pharaohs long gone, eternal processions of royal spirits retracing their passage to the afterlife. Their prows still pointed toward the horizon where the sun is reborn, forever seeking the western lands of the dead. Others insist they are the boats of forgotten priests or betrayed nobles, cursed to sail without rest for crimes unpunished or rituals broken, their oars never dipping into the water yet somehow moving forward, their keels leaving no wake. Imagine standing on a lonely dock in Luxor, the smell of silt and papyrus thick in the air, when a pale shape emerges from the fog, a massive galley carved in the style of the Old Kingdom. Its figurehead, a golden falcon tarnished to green-black, lanterns flickering with flames that cast no heat. You'd feel the hair rise on your arms as distant drums soft, hollow echo over the still water. And for a moment, you might hear voices chanting in a language older than empires. Some say those who attempt to follow the ghost ships vanish, their small boats found adrift the next morning, empty but for a smear of river mud on the seats and the faint smell of myrrh. Archaeologists exploring sunken boat pits near Giza speak quietly of equipment failing without reason, compasses spinning wildly, and sudden chills in the desert heat, as though something unseen brushed past. The ancients believed the Nile was a mirror of the Milky Way, a celestial river connecting worlds. And perhaps these phantom vessels are echoes of journeys still unfinished, caught between stars and sand. Even today, elders in riverside villages light small oil lamps and set them afloat on festival nights, not only to honor ancestors but to appease any wandering ships that might drift too close, their silent crews hungry for company. And when you stand by the Nile at dusk, as the water darkens and the first stars prick the sky, you may glimpse a pale reflection that doesn't match any passing boat, and you'll wonder if the river is still carrying the dead, still bearing their stories on endless, unseen voyages through time. At the stroke of midnight, when the desert holds its breath and the stars hover like watchful eyes above Giza's plateau, the Sphinx casts a shadow that locals whisper should not exist, a lengthening darkness that slides across the sand in a direction no moon could command, its contours curling like a living thing, stretching toward the distant pyramids as though trying to reach something long buried beneath them. Bedouin guides speak in hushed tones of nights, when the wind dies and the air grows unnaturally heavy, when even the camels refuse to move and the torches flicker as though struggling against an unseen hand, and then only then the Sphinx's profile seems to turn, its weathered face catching a glint of starlight in the hollows of its eroded eyes. An old caretaker once swore that, on a lonely night, he watched the shadow uncoil and ripple across the plateau, tracing hieroglyphs in darkness against the sand. symbols he didn't recognize but felt in his bones, a language of gods older than Ra. Archaeologists dismiss the tales as superstition, yet they quietly avoid the site at certain hours, as though their reason falters before ancient power, and even hardened soldiers stationed nearby admit to hearing low, resonant tones like a distant hymn emanating from the statue when no breeze could possibly carry sound. Picture standing there, your feet sinking slightly into cool grains of sand, the silence pressing on your chest like a held breath, when suddenly the ground seems to hum beneath you, and you realize the shadow has reached your toes, darker than any night should all. Ow! You might see patterns in its edges, a falcon's wing, a coiled serpent, a lotus blossom blooming and closing again, as if the stone guardian remembers a time before empires, before the Nile carved its silver path through the earth. Some say the shadow is a doorway, a moment when the boundary between the world of the living and the dead thins, and that those brave or foolish enough to step into it will glimpse the halls of Osiris, their souls measured against the feather of Ma'at. Others claim the Sphinx is not merely stone, but a sentinel that wakes in subtle ways, its consciousness flickering in the cold hours when mortals are least watchful, a reminder that history is not past but waiting, coiled like a cobra in the dark. And so, travelers still gather at a distance on moonlit nights, some clutching charms or quietly murmuring prayers, to watch that impossible shadow creep across the plateau, to feel for a heartbeat the weight of forgotten gods, and to wonder if the Sphinx, at midnight, remembers everything humanity has forgotten. Saqqara's horizon is a wavering mirage by day, its ancient necropolis a crumbling stairway of stone leading the living toward the whispers of the dead. But when the sun bleeds out and the first cool gusts stir the dunes, a storm is said to rise from nowhere, a wall of swirling sand that moves like a living beast, circling the step pyramid of Djoser, with a fury that never crosses its invisible boundary, as if bound by some old command. Generations of villagers tell of nights when the storm howled like jackals, voices braided within the wind, plea, ding and cursing in forgotten tongues. And though cameras and sensors have been set up by curious archaeologists, nothing but static and ruined lenses remains when the storm recedes, as though even technology is unwelcome at that sacred edge. Bedouin herders, their faces wrapped against the sting of grit, speak of travelers who dared to step toward the storm's heart, their lantern lights vanishing like swallowed stars, and the next morning only a perfect ring of untouched sand marks where they once stood. Imagine standing there yourself, the sky bruised with twilight, as a low hum rises beneath your feet, like the heartbeat of the desert itself. The pyramid silhouette, a black tooth biting into the horizon. And then the wind lashes against your skin, grains of sand stinging like tiny sparks until your eyes water and your breath tastes of earth older than language. Some say it is the work of Djoser's architect, Imhotep, his spirit still guarding the secrets carved beneath the stone, a protective curse meant to keep thieves and kings alike from disturbing chambers not meant for mortal eyes, while others whisper that it is a gathering of gods, their unfinished conversations swirling endlessly above the graves of their chosen. On rare occasions, when lightning forks across the desert, witnesses claim to see fleeting shapes within the storm's golden heart figures draped in linen, jackal-headed guardians, or colossal silhouettes that stride against the wind without leaving footprints, only to dissolve into dust the moment you blink. The air during such nights hums with an energy that rattles your bones, a vibration that makes even the most rational minds falter. And as the storm spins tighter, you could almost swear you hear a name carried on the wind, soft but insistent, calling you closer. But step too near, they warn, and the storm will consume not just your body but your memory, erasing you from every scroll, every stone carving, as though you never existed at all. For Saqqara remembers its own, and the eternal storm guards its secrets with jealous, howling devotion. Just before the first pale light spills over the jagged eastern hills, when the Nile still sleeps beneath a veil of silver mist and the desert air holds its breath between night and day, whispers tell of shapes that rise from their tombs and cross the horizon, pharaohs walking as though the centuries between life and dust were only a pause in their eternal command. Locals in tiny river villages swear they've glimpsed tall figures cloaked in linen, their faces hidden by golden masks dulled by time, striding silently across the dunes with staffs that gleam faintly even in the half-light. And though cameras have never captured them, fishermen claim the water's surface shivers unnaturally whenever the royal shadows pass, like the river itself remembers the weight of their decrees. Imagine standing at the river's edge, your breath fogging in the cool dawn, hearing the soft crunch of sand behind you. But when you turn, the desert is empty, save for a single, perfect footprint pressed into the earth where none should be, as if time itself left a mark to remind you that the past has not surrendered. Historians will speak of myths, of dreams passed down by generations too awed by the pyramids to let their kings go. But there is an unease even among scholars when the first sunlight hits the Sphinx's weathered face and the shadows align with forgotten constellations patterns, so precise it's as if a divine hand still guides the heavens. Some priests' texts, rarely shown to the public, whisper that the kings swore to return should their names be spoken wrongly, or their sacred rites be broken. And isn't it strange how many times in modern history, explorers who desecrated graves or mocked old beliefs met fates as if written in sand long ago? A fever here, a sudden accident there, each thread weaving into a larger tapestry of warning. To walk the dawn dunes alone is to feel the world older than you, pressing close, the wind brushing past your ears with a sound almost like chanting, the horizon trembling as the first streak of sun bleeds into gold. And in that moment, you understand why the villagers leave offerings at old stones, dates, water, or a single flower to appease those who once ruled as gods. Whether they truly walk, or whether memory itself becomes flesh in the shifting light, is a mystery the desert keeps. But as the sun rises higher and the sands grow ordinary once more, you can't shake the feeling that unseen eyes have passed judgment on you, that somewhere in the silence between breaths, a king's spirit has acknowledged your gaze, and that the land of the Nile, eternal and unyielding, has reminded you it does not forget its pharaohs. We've only begun to peel back the edges of ancient Egypt's darkest mysteries, just the first glimpses of a far greater, more unsettling tapestry. The desert keeps many secrets yet, curses whispered through broken tomb walls, rituals hidden beneath shifting dunes, and echoes of kings who may still walk at dawn. If these eerie stories sent a shiver down your spine, make sure to subscribe and return for the next chapter. Even stranger, more haunting truths are waiting just beyond the horizon, and you won't want to miss when the sands give up another of their secrets.